on what we see here in this painting. I'll talk more about the author of this watercolor in a bit, but this is an image of Mary, the mother of Jesus, and her relative Elizabeth. It's a remarkable painting, and it's a little shocking, really. I've titled this, by the way, Forecast Magnificat. And the reason I say it's shocking is because of what's really taking place with these two. If you're familiar with the story, Mary gets this invitation from an angel. Says, hey, God's going to be doing something in your life, and you're going to be giving birth to this Jesus child who's going to be part of God's work of saving the world in deep, profound ways. And her response to this, even though she wasn't married yet, and back then, if you were pregnant and not married, that could end your life. And she said, here I am, the servant of the Lord. She said yes to this great invitation. Now, you kind of know what happens next, but I want to pause and just say a word for you Western scientifically minded people. A lot of times when we read a story like the virgin birth narrative or any of the birth narratives of Jesus and some other things that we may come across in the Bible, our sciencey minds immediately go to a place of, I don't know about that. That doesn't jibe. And while we can have some room for mystery and miraculous and all that, sometimes that voice of scientific reason is so powerful in our mind that anytime we even hear a story about Mary and a baby and virgin birth and all that, we immediately close down. We're like, there's nothing here for us. And here's what I want you to hear on that, is that when the writers of Luke and pretty much every book in the Bible wrote their stuff, they were thinking much more about theology than they were historicity or even history. And so don't miss the mega theme messages that are embedded throughout this incredible story just because your scientific mind is getting in the way. How you feel about the virgin birth and all that, that's a discussion and an argument that's been going on for literal thousands of years. And so that's going to keep on going, but what I don't want you to miss is the incredible power of the story that's being communicated. So Mary, this young teenager, she gets a crazy invitation, and she says yes, even though nobody in their right mind would do that. She decides to go visit her relative, Elizabeth, in a town some way far enough away that she's not going to hear the noise from Nazareth. Why would she hear noise from Nazareth? Because she's a 13, 14-year-old girl that's not married yet, and she's going to start to show someday. She doesn't want to hear it. She doesn't want to be in the turmoil of everything that she's going to hear. So she's going to go in the safety of somebody she trusts. When she gets there, this Elizabeth, who has her own miracle happening, something in her senses, something going on in Mary, and she rejoices, and she basically articulates the very thing that Mary has said yes to is already happening in Mary. But why the faces of joy? Because they should be horrified. Mary, because of what she's about to endure, and Elizabeth, who in her time and era was deep into retirement. Doesn't really look like it here. But according to the story, she was way past child-giving years. That's part of the miracle of her story. As her older man husband was given a communication, your wife is going to have a child. And he took issue with that and got put mute for about 9 months until this child was born. That's the way that story goes. Now, why would she be terrified? You know, here in our modern era, if you're a woman and you're about 35 years old or older, you know what they call that? They call that a high-risk pregnancy. You know, they add one more offensive word to that. They say, this is a geriatric pregnancy. What a wonderful, horrific term that is, right? Well, talk about geriatric pregnancy. That's what you got here with Elizabeth, right? In a time in history when she had probably known many women who did not survive childbirth, even though they were young. And now she's older. Donna Randall, you're in your 90s. How would you feel about being pregnant today? Bad idea, right? Yeah, so she proved my point. Thank you, Donna Randall. I appreciate that. These two should be weeping in terror of what's going on, and yet all we see is joy in their faces. That's a curiosity to me, and maybe there's something for us to think about that. In response to everything that Elizabeth has said, 13 or 14-year-old Mary gives us this incredible poem called the Magnificat. This is how it reads. With all my heart, I glorify the Lord. In the depths of who I am, I rejoice in God, my Savior. He has looked with favor on the low status of his servant. Look, from now on, everyone will consider me the low status servant, highly favored because the mighty one has done great things for me. Holy is his name. He shows mercy to everyone, even me, from one generation to the next, who honors him as God. And then she goes on. He has shown great strength with his arm. He has scattered those with arrogant thoughts and proud inclinations. He has pulled the powerful down from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty-handed. He has come to the aid of his servant Israel, remembering his mercy, just as he promised to our ancestors, to Abraham and to Abraham's descendants forever. Now that is quite a poem. In fact, fun fact, the Nazareth Unified School District held a middle school poetry competition. Mary got third place with this one. It's pretty cool. Which just brings me around to say once again that when we look at scripture like this, there was probably nobody, no paparazzi in the bushes, who had their iPhone on just at the right time to capture this incredible eloquence that's happening. So that's probably not it. If Mary had anything to do with this literal composition, most certainly didn't happen at that moment, maybe in retrospect. So what do we have here? We have a literary device. That's what we have here. We have Luke, who's not communicating to an audience like you, who most of you, I'm guessing, has grown up in a Western Christian culture. At least you've been influenced by it, so that you know the basic story. When you hear Virgin Mary, you know what it's about, and you know the basic outline of how things go. There are particulars you don't know, but you basically got the story down, right? But imagine if you're just a person who's showing up in some little hamlet, in the Mediterranean somewhere, and you've heard this talk about Jesus, and there's this new cult-like group that's sort of following him around. You go to see somebody pull out this scroll and tell the story. And right at the beginning of the story, you hear this. This is an illusion. This is foreshadowing. This is forecast of what's to come. And as you look at all these things that he has that she's mentioning in here about things that God has done already, it should sound somewhat familiar if you've been marching through the Following on the Call series, because these are the things that Jesus was talking about throughout. And in fact, that very first thing that we have here, where this starts off with Mary coming to a new realization about herself, an empowerment she didn't know was possible for her as a young Jewish nobody woman. Now, all of a sudden, she feels seen by God, sees empowered by God, amplified by God, celebrated by God. This incredible thing that is happening to her, and she can't stop shutting up about it. Well, how does Jesus begin the whole Sermon on the Mount? Do you remember? Blessed are you. Blessed are you who never would have imagined you'd ever be called blessed. Blessed are you. Again and again and again. You've got no money? Blessed are you. You're mourning the loss of whoever. You are blessed. You are not forsaken. And on and on. And after the blessing, he goes on and gives instruction on how to pull these things off, how to pray, how to live your life in such a way that all these things become more and more true in our world. That's why it's his grand stump speech. That's why it was remembered so well, so that we would catch it and do something with it. Well, Jesus ends his Sermon on the Mount with a warning. I mentioned that. And it entails a forecast. Just like this is forecasting what Jesus' life is going to be about. And frankly, because this was written in retrospect by the Luke community, and if Mary had anything to do with this, she'd be looking back as well and seeing all the things that had happened, and she would say, this happened, in fact. But because she's living, 30 years or so after Jesus' ministry was complete, she's also seeing what's transpired since that new group of people have begun carrying out their mission. And you know what she discovered? The forecast is still stormy. It never calms down. We understand storms today, don't we? And not just here, but we think about our friends in Washington, who are losing so much right now and the devastation they're going through. And we kind of get a little nervous for those burnt patches around California that are terrors for people in the foothills and beyond. There's a forecast in Jesus' last teaching. It involves a parable. And he says, I want you to hear this, that people who listen to what I have to say and don't do what I ask them to do, they are people who build their house on sand. And when the storms come, the winds blow, and the water rises, their house is swept away in destruction. They lose it all. But those who hear my words and follow what I have to say, follow my way, they are like people who build their house on a strong foundation. When the storm comes and the winds howl and the water comes to wash them away, their house remains. So there you have it. Guess we can go now. Just simply do what Jesus said to do, and we got it. And you know what? There's a part of this that I think all of us kind of like, because we like to-do lists in America, don't we? Out of curiosity, how many of you have ever used a to-do list in your life? Of course, I'm not the only one, right? All right, let's get a little nerdier. How many of you used an actual planning system to help you knock out your to-do lists in your life? Yep. How many of you, as 2026 approaches, you are thinking, I got to get myself a new handy planner to help me do all the things I need to do in 2026? Yeah, of course. And most of you are, but you're too ashamed to admit it. That's fine. That's great. We all do this. We are a drive, get it done kind of society. And when we hear Jesus say something like this, and it seems like it carries some threat to it, I don't think he's talking about afterlife stuff here at all, by the way. I think he has to do with how the quality of your life is and all that stuff. But when we hear this stuff like, you can't just hear, you got to do, we get into do mode, and we immediately start to think, what are the things I got to do to make sure that that doesn't happen? And God, Jesus, whatever, becomes our new CEO or our new taskmaster that's saying, you got to do this or else, and you better. And there's a part of us that loves that in a weird way, because it feels kind of simple. It feels like we have an authority, but we Americans have a problem with authority, don't we? And after a while, we lose some of our mojo for following this stuff. So I wonder if there's anything else in this image that might give us a hint as to what a better motivation might be. Because that's got me curious. You know the stats, right? I'll be the first to give a confession today. I'd like to get in a little better shape in 2026. Too many cookies. You know I have a cookie problem, right? So too many cookies. there's hell to pay coming January, right? I know that. So these are things that I know I want to do, but I also know that I'm like most people in the whole world, that when we go about doing something to improve our lives, we last how many days until we fall flat on our face, right? So there's got to be some other motivation that drives us, and not just in our diet and exercise, but in other things if we want to see it sustained. And I think we get a hint from this. I see joy. And I was curious about where this painting came from. It's actually a watercolor. And it comes from an artist named Corby Eisbacher from North Carolina. And he wrote this about this painting. I painted Jump for Joy with the intention to speak not only through the image, but the color that breathed life into it. This was the first painting I did in this series since becoming sober in 2007. So I was definitely filled with a new life that I prayed others would see through the painting. Today I'm 17 years sober, and there are still some people finding joy in my gift of art, and for that I'm truly blessed. Isn't that fascinating? What motivated him to do this? Joy. Joy. Something deeper. Not a compulsion. Not somebody telling him, hey man, you should really use more color in your paintings. But you'd sell a lot more colorful paintings if you just get up to speed. No, nothing like that. It was the joy of his change, the joy that was going deep in his life that motivated him to do so much else. And the thing is, here at Crosswalk, we had, I think, 42 recovery groups meeting here at this church through a given week. Now we have 43. The newest one started today. It meets at 6:30 in the morning across the hall in our small conference room because they weren't sure if anybody would show up at 6:30 in the morning. 25 people showed up in a room for 12. Isn't that awesome? Yeah. You know what happens to people who stick with the program and see it? Joy. Joy. I mean, why do they come back? I know some guys who have been clean decades, and they keep coming back to meetings. And when are you going to figure it out? You know, that was my naive question when I first showed up here. And they're like, no, I'm not here. I mean, yeah, it's always good to have the booster shot to keep me in line, but I'm here because of joy, because I want to see life happen for other people. I'm here to give that message, to support that happening. I think that's what's going on here. I think, yes, they're fully aware of the forecast of their lives, what's happening next, but there's also something deeper than that horrible forecast coming their way that will not ever go away. Things they don't want to do won't be put before them, and they're going to find themselves doing them because joy is different than just happiness or satisfaction. It runs deep. So Lynn and I, in 1997 and 1999, we welcomed our two children into the world. And Noah, my son, who was born in 1997, he was born 6 weeks before he was supposed to. He was a preemie. And we were at a teaching hospital in Peoria, Illinois. That's where he was born. And because he was preemie, I got to be a more hands-on dad than I normally would. I got to feed him very, very regularly. And so I'd go in and I would hold this little peanut who could fit literally within my forearm and feed him his bottle. And I'll tell you that my son, who eats like a horse now very fast, it's been that way since the very first bottle he ever took, right? Just kills it, right? And it was with joy that I did that. It was with joy that I would get there early in the morning. And Lynn and I, when we would raise our kids and have to get, you know the drill, you've heard about it. You get up in the middle of the night to take care of these kids. And it's not always easy, but it's for the joy of the moment that you do it, for the love of what you're seeing that you do this kind of a thing. And they do messy things, these kids. And they're things that nobody really wants to do, right? But it's for the love, it's for the joy that you do it, right? My wife would tell stories. I know this was true in Illinois where I was a pastor, and also true here, that as she would be heading out the door to get to church, have both kids, because I'd be at church long before she was ready to go with the kids. She'd have both kids all dressed and ready to go, and just as they were stepping out the door, my daughter, Lakin, she would decide that was the opportune moment to fill her drawers. And fill she did on occasion. New outfit, new everything, and it happened like clockwork. Now, my wife, I'm sure I could see her eyes rolling and I can hear the, kind of a thing, because who wouldn't? And yet, for the joy, for the love that she has for our kids, it was no burden. It was her kid. It was out of joy that she did these things. It may not be a kid for you. It may be a pet. that means a lot to you. It may be a spouse or a significant other that means a lot to you. Maybe a parent, maybe a dear friend. I don't know. But I bet you can think of somebody who's been that kind of a motivation for you. When they need something from you, it's not because you feel like you have to because it's the right thing. It's like you get to do this. You desire to do this. And it's out of joy that you do this. Well, my friends, the forecast isn't any different than it was when Jesus was born. It's the same forecast. There are going to be bright, sunny days when we experience joy and happiness and peace, and it's going to be beautiful and great. But storms will come. Storms will come. Storms we don't want. Storms we couldn't predict. And there's going to be a decision point at that point about how we're going to get through those storms. And I don't think it has to do with the punch list. I think it has to do with orienting ourselves in what is real and whole and what makes us who we are. What takes us to the place where we hear what Mary heard, that you are deeply and profoundly loved. What Jesus was trying to communicate when he said in so many different ways, you who don't think you are blessed. You can't screw that up. You already are. You're already in it. The love of God is pervasive. It's everywhere. See it. Breathe it. Become it. This is our invitation at Christmas, not to just celebrate one child being born and the evidence of an incarnation of a kind in this one moment. But it's for us to wonder, how can this thing really be born again and again and again and again in all of us all the time? Because that's the real message of Christmas. It's not just God coming down into one situation, but it's the mega theme, it's the mega story, it's the great news that it's always been this way. And now we see it, and now we can envelop it and embrace it. Because now we have the confidence because of the Marys and the Josephs and the Elizabeths and the Zacharias and all the disciples and Jesus and so forth, that this thing is real. Will you embrace who you are? That word Magnificat has all to do with that. I looked it up just so I wouldn't screw it up in front of Michael Gungor, who titled his last album Magnificat, and I thought that would be embarrassing if I got this definition wrong. And it refers to my soul magnifies the Lord. My soul magnifies the Lord. My being magnifies the divine, the holy, the good. That's who we are at our core. What happens when we tap into that and believe it? What happens to you? Joy happens to you. Love happens to you. Not a love that is fleeting, but a love despite the forecast is with us. It gets us through hell. Doesn't mean our lives might not fall apart, but our life will stay strong. Do you know the difference? There is a joy, there is a love that awaits us. Let's take a moment of prayer together, and then I invite Michael Gungor to help respond. So I invite you to close your eyes for a moment, and I am trusting that the presence of God is in this space, that we've already been in and around this pervasive love. And I'm guessing that maybe today you needed to be reminded that you are blessed, that you are incredible, that you are magnificent, that you need to know that your soul at your core magnifies the divine, the spirit, the breath of life. It already is. Can you catch up to it? Can you see it? Can you celebrate it? And so in the silence of your heart right now, can you just say, I am blessed? Can you whisper it with your mouth and your breath? Let's do it on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. I am blessed. Can you say it in a everyday language, talking across the table voice? 1, 2, 3. I am blessed. Can you say it with conviction? 1, 2, 3. I am blessed. And in a world that needs to know that there is blessing that far outweighs the horrors and the torture that we see every day we turn on the news, can you join me in shouting from the mountaintops, I am blessed? 1, 2, 3. I am blessed. And now one more thing as you think about all the things that people are going through and all the hope that they need to know. Can you say to them, not I am blessed, but you are blessed because we are? 1, 2, 3. You are blessed. God, may it be true of us that out of the joy that has happened in our lives and who we know you to be, that we cannot help but follow and cannot help to see your beauty emerge again and again in our lives and our worlds. May it be so. Amen.